Welcome back, friends. It's the first week since the new data slate was released, and we got some pretty interesting results to go through. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Just a heads up, if I sound a little bit more raspy than usual, I'm just getting over a cold, so that would be why. Just a quick reminder before we get started, do the old YouTube pleasantries. If you like the video, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps push it out there for more people to see. If you're like it, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you get all my latest videos. And if you're looking for any other ways to help support the channel, you can check out my Patreon, patreon.com/warpfriends. Link is in the description below. All right, guys, let's get started. First up is the player numbers from the previous week. So last week was, like I said, the first week of the data slate. So we had 699 players. Games played, we had 3,707, and we had 15 tournaments. First chart we're going to look at is the win percentage by armies for the previous week. So just a quick reminder, Games Workshop acceptable win rate is about 45 to 55%. So anything in that range will be in green. Anything 5% above or below will be in orange. Anything above or below that will be in red. So coming in number one last week was Grey Knights with 58.3%. Then we had Drukhari at 57, Black Templars at 55.6, Emperor Children at 55, and then Imperial Knights at 54.9. And down at the bottom we had Agents at 28.6, Orcs at 38.9, we had Tyranids at 40.1, Space Marines at 42%, and Astra Militarum at 45.6%. So Grey Knights had a really good first week. They've been kind of struggling since the new codex came out, not getting the best results, but they had really good results this week. So if there's any Grey Knight players out there, let me know in the comments what you think contributed to some good results in the first week here. Drukhari had a good week with their new codex coming up soon. I know people are having kind of mixed results on that, but they still pulled out some good results this week. Then we have Black Templars and Emperor's Children kind of coming in with both around 55%. They had really good weeks, and they've been last data slate sitting around the middle to the bottom. So with kind of the shift in the meta, they've kind of jumped up, at least in the first week. Despite some of the changes, Knights still had a pretty good win rate at 54.9%. They did struggle a little bit in some other categories, so we'll get into that a little bit later. But overall, the win percentage was still there for them. And one of the surprising ones I'm happy to see, AdMech up to 52%. Really good first week with that new buff to call. We'll see if it keeps up. It might just be, first couple weeks, people are kind of surprised by it. But so far, so good, 51%. It's the highest they've seen in a long time. Some of the armies that continue to struggle, Orcs, below 40%. Any of the changes that, I guess, didn't fix too much. Now it is just the first week and not all tournaments use new data slates, so have to take a little bit with a grain of salt. We'll get some more concrete results over the next couple weeks. Can't look into one specific week too much, but it's all we have right now. But as the weeks roll on, we get a better idea of how these armies are going to kind of shape out moving forward. Overall, pretty decent. A couple armies up at the top there. Creeping up to 60%, but like I said, it's the first week of the new data slate is kind of a little bit of a chaos. Everyone's just trying everything new, and no one really has a firm grasp on the meta just yet. So after 3 or 4 weeks, we'll have a really good idea of how things are going to kind of shape up moving forward. All right, next up is the army representation. So this is the percentage of players who play each army. So if everyone played every army equally, they would all be at about 3.6, 3.7%. So this kind of gives you a good idea how many people are playing each army. So coming in number one was Death Guard at 6.4%. Then we have World Leaders at 6, Space Marines at 5.7, Aeldari at 5.7, and Tyranids at 5. And down at the bottom, we had Agents at 0.1, Death Watch at 0.9, Gene Stealers at 1.4, Sisters at 2.1, and Thousand Sons at 2.3. Death Guard still number one with 6.4, but they did drop quite a bit compared to what they have been, upwards of anywhere from 8 to 10%. And then World Leaders also had a huge jump this week, up to 6%, coming in number 2. The World Leaders players clearly excited for some of the new changes they got, and a lot of players came out this week, so that's good to see. A little bit of a shake-up here. Tyranids and Aeldari and Space Marines are always kind of up there. Interesting to see Chaos Knights is actually higher than Imperial Knights. Imperial Knights dropped down to just above 4%, close to the meta average, so we're seeing a little bit of a drop-off from the Knight players in the first week, but again, we'll just see how that kind of shapes up moving forward once everyone sort of figures out what's going on. So down the bottom there, Thousand Sons, they had a pretty good drop-off. They went down to about 2.3%. Not surprising. People weren't too excited for the changes that were made in the data slates. It's not surprising to see the drop-off there. Orcs, again, I don't think they got enough done to them to really sort of bring the players back too much, and the first week results, back that up as well, still at 2.4%, which is really low for Orcs. AdMech is one of those ones that jumped up quite a bit, at 3.1%. That's almost double what they have been for a long time, and creeping up close to the meta average. We'll see if the results keep up moving forward over the next couple of weeks. You might even see some more players, which is good to see. And same as Black Templars, up around 3.3%, another army that got a considerable boost of players once some of the top armies there dropped off a little bit. So overall, the chart looks a lot better than it did last data slate. I mean, Death Guard is still number one, but last time they were usually around like 7 to 10%. Now they're down to 6.4, and I think they'll keep dropping a little bit because they didn't get crazy good results. So I think people will finally hopefully start trying something different, and we might see a little bit of a shakeup here. Overall, lots of green and just a little bit of outliers here and there. But the first week results are a little bit more balanced than the previous data slate was, so that's good to see. All right, next up is the combined stats for the previous week. So this is Army win rates, XOX1 percentage, and representation. Just a quick reminder, XOX1 percentage is the percentage of players who went 5-0 or 4-1 in a tournament. It's not a perfect stat, but it's a good way to sort of compare it to their win rate and just see how an army is doing. The higher the XOX1, the more likely you're going to see those armies at the top tables with a better chance to win tournaments, and the lower percentage, the less likely you're going to see. And the weekly average for XOX1 is anywhere from like 14 to 15%. So coming in number 1, we had Black Templars, then we had Emperor's Children, Grey Knights, Aeldari, and World Eaters. And down at the bottom, we had Agents, Orcs, Deathwatch, Guard, and Tyranids. Black Templars had a really good first week. Most of this did come with the Gladius Detachment, but they did have 55% win rate and a 26% XOX1. Over a quarter of their players, 5-0, 4-1, so that's a lot of players reaching those top tables, or at least a chance to get up there. So really good results from the Black Templar players. And same as Emperor's Children, they had another strong showing, almost mirroring what Black Templars did there. So two armies that were kind of in the middle to the bottom of the pack last data slate and had a good first week, so that's good to see. So Drukhari, they had a 57% win rate, getting a lot of wins there, but their XOX1 was only about 10%. And well, they actually did have a pretty good representation for Drukhari, almost 3%. So that means not a lot of players were finding a lot of success, but not a lot of players are doing very poorly either. So a lot of Drukhari players sitting, 3-2 kind of situation. Some of the armies that struggled there, surprisingly, was Death Guard, 51% win rate, but an XOX1 of 6, almost 7%. And despite their huge representation, it's quite a drop-off over the previous weeks in the last data slate there. So again, another army that just kind of lived in the mid-boards. Not really too many players for Death Guard reaching or even getting close to those top tables. So we'll see if this kind of continues going forward. It could be a sign of things to come where Death Guard is still good, but not like dominating like they were, which would be good to see. I know they didn't get too many changes, but a few point drops here and there, I guess, made enough of a difference to sort of set them back, at least in the first week. And everyone else sort of underneath them is just kind of living anywhere from 45 to 48% and just below the average XOX1. So not like terribly concerning, but definitely sort of down at the bottom, kind of where you would expect them to be. Then you have poor old Orcs and even Guard, 45% win rate and 0% XOX1. So no one from Guard really had any good success this week from the tournaments that I went through on Best Coast Pairing. So unfortunately, the first week of the new data slate, not looking too hot for those armies, but there's still time to pick it up and change it around. Like I said, everything's kind of in flux for the first couple weeks until everything kind of smooths out and we get enough data to really pull some concrete numbers from. But for now, pretty interesting to see some new armies up at the top, which is always nice to see. All right, next up is the tournament wins for each army last week. So we had Aeldari with 4, then we had Blood Angels with 2, and then we had World Eaters, Tyranids, Space Marines, Sisters of Battle, Votann, Death Guard, Chaos Knights, Chaos Demons, and Admech, all picking up a win. Aeldari leading the way with 4 tournaments. Blood Angels, they did get 2. It was nice to see Admech did pick up a win. They performed really well throughout the weekend, and it's good to see that one of their players did get a win. They're kind of one of those armies that usually struggle to get too many tournament wins, so it would be nice to see them up at least around the middle of the pack for once. It's been a while since then. Overall, it was a pretty good spread. Aeldari did win a lot of tournaments, but, it's the first week, and they're still a pretty good army, so we'll see what happens moving forward. They were number 2 or 3 last data slate, so if things continue, they could be the front runner to sort of get the most tournament wins this data slate, but again, just 1 week of data. And then we're going to look at the sub-faction tournament wins, just so you can kind of get an idea how each army was getting their wins. For Aeldari, they got their wins with Aspect Host and War Host, both picked up 2. Tyranids got with Subterranean Assault. Space Marines actually did pick up theirs with Shadow Mark, so one of their new detachments did pick up a win. It had really good results the first week, so there could be something there. Admech picked it up with Halo's Creed Battleclade. Votann actually got theirs with the Brandfast. It wasn't one of the most played detachments, but it did have some good results, kind of similar to the Space Marine Shadow Mark. Players who did play it did do pretty well with it. So overall, nice spread of wins here, not one detachment sort of dominating, and even for Aeldari, it was split across a couple detachments. So it's good to see. It's nice to see a lot of numbers here. All right, and the first faction focus we're going to look at this week is Grey Knights. So again, it is just the first week of the data slate, so there's not too much to look in here, but I figured I'd pick Grey Knights just because they had been struggling and they had a really good week, so we'll just kind of see how they're doing in the first week here. So you look at the previous 8-week results here, you can see that their army rep has gone up since their codex release, anywhere from about 2 to 3%, which is probably where you expect them to live. Now, if they do continue getting really good results from the win rate wise, you'll definitely see some more players, but I expect them to live around 3% for this data slate. This kind of where they usually end up falling into when they're at least semi-relevant. And if you look at the win percentage, it was actually a huge jump. They had been struggling, like I mentioned, since August 18th. Their representation's up over 2%, which was down about 1% before that, but their win percentage actually dropped down to like 45 or below, and this is the first week it was about 50. Since the data slate dropped last week, really good results in the first week. And if you look at the stats versus meta average, you can see 58% win rate versus the average of 49. Army representation is just 2.7 versus 3.6, so it is below, but not terribly far below. XOX1 is 21 versus 14, so again, quite a bit higher there, 50% higher than the average. And they have 0 tournament wins, but there's only been a handful of tournaments so far, so not really too much to look into there. Looking at the subfaction player counts there, Warpbane Taskforce clear favorite, 63% of the players. Banishers and Sanctic Spearhead both did get about 15% of the players as well, so they made up majority of the rest, but clearly Warpbane is the most popular. And you look at the win percentage for the subfactions there, Warpbane is, it makes sense as to why they had so many players. They had a 60% win rate, so really good win rate there, and same as Banisher, so over 60% as well. The other one's down below 50, so they kind of dragged it down a little bit. Overall, I think there's going to be a lot of play with Warpbane there. They seem to be very popular, and despite the higher player percentages there, they still got a lot of wins out of it. So I expect to see Warpbane kind of leading this category moving forward. Like I mentioned, first week, but overall, really good first week for Grey Knights. So if there's any Grey Knight players out there, let me know what you think. If you got any games in since the data slate dropped, let me know how it feels. What's kind of changed for you guys? Do you expect these results to continue going forward, or you kind of expect them to sort of regress back down to around the middle of the meta, which wouldn't be a bad thing either. And next up, we're going to look at Thousand Sons. So again, this is kind of an army in the opposite situation of Grey Knights, where they kind of had a big drop off here compared to Grey Knights, which went up quite a bit. Looking at the last 8 weeks results there, you can see their representation did drop off quite a bit over the last couple weeks. They were up around 4 to 4.5%. Now they're below 3%, and their win percentage dropped down to 47%, and they've been sitting anywhere from like 50 to 58% roughly. So it's quite a bit of a drop off the first week. I know the changes weren't favorable for them, so it's not surprising to see them kind of dip down this way. You look at their stats versus meta average. Win percentage is 46.7 versus 49, so below there. Army rep is 2.3, so again, they dropped down below the average, which they had been above. And their XOX1 is just below the average, so not terribly bad there, but not as good as it had been. Looking at the subfaction player counts there, despite the codex coming out and having a bunch of options, they only ended up with 2 detachments being played last week. Grand Coven with 75% of the players, and Rubica with 25. If you look at the subfaction win percentages there, it's kind of what you expect. Grand Coven's around 47%, and the Rubica Phalanx is around 45, so, nothing too crazy there. Despite the high player count Grand Coven has, the results really weren't there. Comparing to Grey Knights, who had 63% of players with Warpbane, and they had a really high win rate. So people are trying what they think is the best option out of the changes that were made, and they're not getting great results. If there's any Thousand Sun players out there, let me know how you guys feel. Did you get any games in yet? How does the changes sort of affect you? Do you think that this is kind of going to be what it is moving forward, that Thousand Suns are going to kind of have to live at the bottom of the meta for at least the next couple months before any changes are made? Give me your first impressions and let me know what you think. All right, and that's it for this week, guys. I know it was a short one, but we only had 1 week of data, so there's only one set of charts to go through. I'd like to big shout out to my Patreon members, Meet the Great, John Gurman, William Viz, and Stahik, and my YouTube channel members, Andrew Stone. If you guys like to join them and help support me, you can visit my Patreon, patreon.com/warpfriends. Again, these videos are probably going to start coming out on Wednesdays like they have been, due to the fact that I have to go grab all the tournament data myself by hand. So it's a little bit of a labor-intensive process, but I'm making sure I get that done, and the videos will definitely keep coming out. Thank you guys for your support again. Good luck in the tournaments coming up next weekend, and I'll see you next week.